Learning to read Japanese can be an incredibly daunting task, one that can take many hundreds of hours and plenty of reading content. So today I'm going to be showing you exactly how I got into first reading Japanese and how I got over that initial hurdle of getting into the daily habit of reading lots of Japanese. Now, obviously my channel is about learning Japanese, so the task of reading a language like Japanese that has a completely different alphabet, one that's based off Chinese characters and that has many thousands of different characters that are used for different words and that all have individual meanings, it can be very complicated, especially to learn these types of languages. So, preferably you want to be taking the RTK approach, which if you don't know what that is, I suggest checking out a video, which I'm going to link in the description below, called How to Learn Kanji with RTK and Anki. It has a brilliant guide, shows you exactly what to do in order to learn Kanji in the first 2 months or so of learning Japanese, and that can give you a massive boost into learning Japanese and get you a good stepping stone. Otherwise, you're gonna be trying to learn to read Japanese whilst also trying to learn to understand what kanji is and how to, make sense of all that, and it can be quite scary and quite hard work to do that. So I would definitely recommend learning kanji first before you actually get into learning to read Japanese. However, even if you take the RTK approach to learning Japanese or a language like Chinese, and you learn all those base characters and you know what the characters mean in English, you still won't be able to read the language, obviously, you just know the alphabet. So what do you do then? Well, you need to know when the characters are used in different words and different situations and different sentences. So in order to do that, you need a lot of reading. You need to do a lot of reading in order to pick up that intuitive knowledge on when to use different characters in different situations. So to be able to do that, you need to do something called extensive reading. You can also use intensive reading, which I recommend using with Anki flashcards, where you break down sentences, try to understand what they mean by putting different parts of the sentences into a dictionary, understanding them, and then putting them into a flashcard, into a sentence flashcard, and using Anki to do that. Intensive reading is basically just breaking down a sentence and trying to understand its constituent parts, whether it be the grammar or the words. Extensive reading, however, is completely different. It's essentially just reading for fun. You're essentially trying to read as much as you possibly can and just sort of get as much language input as you can. And this is where a lot of people get confused in the language learning community. Most people don't really know that they're doing one or the other, but a lot of people tend to go down the intensive reading approach. They use textbooks like Genki, or they use other methods, or they solely do Anki and they don't actually read Japanese. And the problem here comes with, you need that exposure of reading lots of Japanese in order to be able to read Japanese, which is very counterintuitive when you first think about it. But in order to progress and understand more Japanese, you need to be exposed to more. So based on the research done by linguist Dr. Stephen Krashen, we know that the fundamental acquisition process of language learning comes down to understanding messages. There's a brilliant video of Stephen Krashen speaking German on YouTube, but the way he's speaking and the props he's using at the time makes it so that you can completely understand everything that he's saying.
Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat zwei Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie? Ohren? Hat zwei Ohren.
So language acquisition actually happens when we understand these messages. So what does this mean? Well, it means that extensive reading is quite probably more useful than intensive reading in the long term. Extensive reading will eventually, given enough input, given enough reading, will outlast intensive reading and will allow you to acquire more language. Why? Because time-wise, if you're spending 15 minutes on one section of a text with intensive reading, you're only learning a small amount of the language. Whereas in the same amount of time with extensive reading, in 15 minutes, you could be reading through pages and pages of a book. You'll be exposed to more language. You won't necessarily have analyzed it as intensely as you would have using intensive reading. But given that exposure and that repeated exposure over a long period of time, you will start to understand a lot of what you see, especially if you combine it with intensive reading. Then you will slowly start to understand more. The more you understand, the more you get to acquire the language. So it's all about getting as much exposure, as much extensive reading as you possibly can, whilst also using a bit of intensive reading in the form of Anki flashcards to help you progress. A great example that I gave in the blog post that corresponds with this video over on my blog was the sentence, "He lowered his head in sign of assent and approval." Now, I'd never really heard of assent until the other day, I don't know if it's a common word or not, but I never heard of it. As you can probably guess by that sentence, assent means basically approval or acknowledgement, like I agree, basically, is kind of what it means. And you can guess that from the sentence. So a lot of extensive reading is just this. It is reading a sentence, not understanding one piece of that sentence, but because you understand the rest of the sentence and the situation is used in, you can understand what that word means. And that is the true power of acquiring language through input and extensive reading. So this last example that I gave in English is called comprehensible input. What that means is you understand everything around the one thing you don't understand, and you essentially have one unknown. And because everything else you understand, you can quickly acquire the unknown because you're using your guessing skills essentially to pick out and understand what that word means. Extensive reading is incredibly powerful in terms of language acquisition and improving your reading skills in whatever language you're learning. So if you can, try and get as much reading content as you can and just binge through it, get as much reading in as you can on a daily basis, and you will definitely improve. However, obviously, if you're like me and when you first started learning, you really struggled to actually get into the habit of reading, then we're going to talk about how to resolve that in the next couple of tips. You might not necessarily be in with the community, essentially, of the language that you're learning, and you might not necessarily know what sites are available and what places you can look for to find reading material. So what I would try and do is first try and get involved with some of the communities that you can get involved in, the Discord channels or Twitter or whatever social media, but don't get so stuck in it that you end up spending all your time there chatting and not learning the language. Of course, when choosing reading material, it's very important to consider comprehensible input when you choose the material. Obviously, this can be quite difficult because if you can't read Japanese yet, it might be hard to decipher or choose reading material and figure out, like, is this hard or is this difficult? And I think the best way to do that is look what other people have done. So you can check out links in the description below to a couple of posts that I think might be useful for you. I've got one where I specifically go through some of the books I've read and give them a difficulty, basically on how good and how hard they are. And you can also, if you're starting off from the very beginning, check out some graded readers. These are essentially basically texts that people have taken, put them into a book, and they either have the English equivalent on the opposite side, or they have ways of analyzing the text as you go through them. So you can, if you really do get stuck, you can check their analysis and get a gist of what's going on and then continue to read. What I wouldn't do with those though is study them like a textbook or anything, just sort of read through it as quickly as you can. So yeah, when you are choosing material, make sure you don't choose anything that's too easy, because if you choose something that's too easy, you're only going to be revising things you already know, and you're not necessarily going to be learning anything new. If you choose something that's too difficult, then you're not going to be acquiring any new language because you're not going to be understanding much. You will only understand, say, one sentence within every 3 or 4 pages. So you need to get a good balance. Try and understand what level you're at and whether something is easy to read. Try and sort of see if you can understand the majority of what you're reading, and still also learn quite a lot of what you're reading at the same time, if that makes sense. You need to be able to understand a lot of it and get the kind of gist of what's going on in order to understand and learn new vocabulary and new grammar points. What I would suggest is to find a dictionary for your language that you're learning and essentially Google keywords of topics that you are interested in, whether it be programming or sports or whatever. Put those keywords into the dictionary for the language you're learning, and also find the word for book and just pump those into Google, and then you'll find a bunch of books ready and waiting. Usually Google selects the top rated books or the best selling books and shows them all right at the top for you, so you can choose some of those books, give them a try. You can also put for kids, for example, figure out what the words for kids would be, and put that at the end of the Google search, and you'll obviously find plenty of reading content online. Another great thing you can actually do is try and find the books that you've read already as a child or as a young adult and try and find them in the language you're learning. All you have to do simply for this is type in the title in English and then type in like Japanese or whatever in Japanese, obviously, and then see what comes up in the Japanese search results. Usually there will be something that says the English title and then it'll have the Japanese title as well, and then you can put that Japanese title into Amazon and hopefully you'll be able to find a search listing for that and buy it from Japan. One quick tip I will add, if you're trying to buy a book that you've never heard of before and you don't really know how difficult it is to read or not, that is to go onto Amazon or Book Live if you're learning Japanese and see if there is an option to read the book for free for a little bit. And basically, obviously, this will let you have a look at the contents of the book and give you a rough idea as to how difficult the contents is and whether or not you are interested in it. I would highly recommend doing this before purchasing a book. Not all books have this option, unfortunately, and it is very limited on Amazon. But on Book Live, there's quite a few books that have either completely free versions, which is great because you can read an entire book for free, or test reads, and you can give that a try. If you're not sure how to use Book Live or how to sign up, you can check out the blog post, which I'll leave in the link in the description. Alternatively, you can always find reading content in the form of blog posts and other online content. You could simply just search the keywords, as I said before, and try and find websites that are related to that certain topic, that certain niche that you're interested in, and use that as reading material. But yeah, if you're still struggling to find reading material for Japanese, then check out both links in the description down below on my guide to finding and buying Japanese books, and the other guide to finding and getting Japanese ebooks, a lot of which are free, which is awesome. Now, the third tool tip, I'm not really sure what to call it because it's not necessarily a tool or a tip, but it is something that I definitely did that I found really beneficial to my language learning and my reading, building reading habits in the early stages of learning Japanese, and that is a reading challenge. Now, what do I mean by reading challenge? Well, there's probably quite a few online for other languages and probably Japanese as well, but the main one I'm going to be talking about today is called Tadoku. And Tadoku is literally meaning in Japanese many read. The kanji is literally many read. And it's a competition that is run monthly that essentially pitches people against each other into how much they can read of the language. The main reason this was so beneficial for me was because I was quite a competitive person. I still am. And so being able to see a global leaderboard where I can, see how much I'm doing compared to other people, how much I'm reading in a day compared to other people was really beneficial for me. And it gave me that motivation, that boost to sort of push on and read more to try and beat those other people. So if you're the kind of person that is that way inclined, then I suggest checking out Tadoku and giving it a try. The way it works is quite simple. You have many different options on what type of reading content you want to put into the contest. And they're very good. They know the language community well, so they have many different options. Things like light novels and visual novels as well, they also count. And each one gives you a certain score. So you can put in the amount of time, I believe, it's been a while since I've done it, so I might be wrong. But I believe you can put in the amount of time you've done something, and then it will calculate roughly how many words and how many pages you've read. And it'll add that to your score. And then you can obviously see how much you've read compared to other people. Each competition is run for a month, and then the next one runs. And what's really beneficial about this is, on average, it takes about 30 days to build a new habit. For some people, it does take longer, obviously, and other people, it does take less time. But it's about, on average, about 30 days. And so by the end of one competition time slot, I guess, you should be in the habit of reading Japanese on a daily basis. And this is why it was so powerful for me when I started first learning Japanese, because it really got me into the habit of reading daily. It also motivated me to read much more on a daily basis as well. I went from reading something like 10 minutes a day to something like 3 to 5 hours, depending on how many periods I had free. I was at uni at the time, I was at university, so I had a lot of time free and I could really, push myself when it came to this. For a lot of people, obviously, that's not the case. However, it will definitely get you reading more Japanese. Even if it gets you reading some Japanese compared to none, it's done its job, and that's a great start. So yeah, as I said before, if you're like me and you're really motivated by competition, then I would highly check out Tadoku. I'll leave another link in the description down below for that. So you guys, if you found the information helpful so far, then don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more videos on language learning. And if you've made it this far, I would love to hear your thoughts on this video's format and layout. I've tried to sort of create a script and also try to read a bit ad-lib, so I don't want to read entirely from the script. I do want to also use the script to sort of, as a base, I guess, and sort of read kind of off it, but not off it, if you know what I mean. And I think hopefully it should make a better video and a better viewing experience, because normally I kind of just ramble. I'll load up the camera, I'll load up Audacity, and I'll just ramble for 30 minutes and make huge long videos that kind of just don't need to be that long. So if you like this form of content and you prefer it, then please let me know and hit the like button and let me know. That'd be awesome. And thank you everyone on Patreon who's supporting me right now, especially Harry and all the other brilliant people on Patreon who are, liking the content over there. If you are interested in any of the content that I make, please go check out the Patreon content. I've got many more videos on there that aren't on YouTube that talk about many different aspects of language learning. And I also have the new sentence bank for the $5 tier, which is going to be, it's a massive sentence bank of Anki decks for Japanese. And I'm constantly adding new decks to that. I'm taking requests from people that are on Patreon. And I'm adding new decks to that monthly. And it's on Google Drive now, so you can download everything in bulk. Definitely check that out if you are interested. So yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.